interesting observation, right? Because it really does behave like a religion, but it's a religion without like a good doctrine.
Yes.
It's a religion that hasn't been thought out by wise people.
That's right.
Where they haven't come up with these different, like the Ten Commandments, or different pathways to
Correct.
to forgiveness. There's nothing. So it's this thing that behaves like a religion, but it's not really well thought out, and it's very illogical. And it also combines pharmaceutical drug companies and there's a lot of other weird shit that's attached to this religion.
Yes.
That you kind of need. Like, if you're gonna do this whole woke thing and like go guns a-blazing, you're gonna have to get drugs involved. Like they're gonna have to do hormone blockers. It's like it doesn't just happen on its own, and that somehow or another is natural to them. Like this is how you be your true self. Like your true self is you add hormones that aren't supposed to be in your body. That's your
crazy.
true self. Like how do you know?
Right.
And it's irreversible. Are we fucking sure this is?
Yeah, and by the way, instead of your true self being, maybe I should be skeptical of some of the crap that I'm putting into my body, I should lean into the idea that I should put more foreign things into the human body. That's what to me is so fascinating about it, is the true self. Like, I think all of us, that's sort of part of the human journey for truth. We're all asking, who are we? Right. What is our true self? And maybe we should be asking ourselves, this is sort of more of a Bobby Kennedy point, but why are we putting all this weird crap into our food, into our water? Maybe we should be a little bit more skeptical, like my body is a temple, rather than I'm going to welcome even more pharmaceutical intervention into the human body. It's very interesting how some religions view the body as a temple, and some religions almost invite the pollution. I think the woke thing is inviting the pollution.
Well, they're also inviting. So one of the weirdest things is if you are on the wrong side of their ideology, like if you're aligned with Trump, like RFK Jr. is, now all of a sudden I've seen like people on the left that are trying to dismiss a lot of the things that he says about additives in food, about atrazine, fluoride in the water, all these different things, because now they're connecting not having toxins in your food with a right-wing idea.
It's crazy. It's mind-blowing.
It's so bananas. Like even being healthy, fitness, they're connecting fitness with a right-wing idea.
Yeah. Well, and it raises one of my sort of core political beliefs is that our politics is focused on fake shit and distractions to distract us from the real stuff, right? And so if I'm looking at the environmental movement in the United States of America, and I don't even have like strong views on what the carbon footprint ultimately does. I'm sort of skeptical of the experts here, but I'm also skeptical of, the other side. I just don't really know what I think about this. I think it's insane to try to eliminate fossil fuels. That's kind of a belief that I have. But it's interesting that the environmental movement in America, the only thing that it talks about is the carbon footprint. And it never talks about like, why do we have the highest rates of obesity in the world right now? Right? Why is it that American kids spend less time outdoors in nature than they ever have in the history of our 250-year civilization? There's this weird way in which we get distracted by the fake stuff instead of focusing on the real stuff. And I think there is a really very important environmental conversation to be had. It was interesting when one of the first things that happened when I was a senator is you had this terrible train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Got a lot of headlines, and it was a mistake at the time that wasn't obvious. They basically set off a few of the chemical cars, which, I mean, if you see the images, it looks like a nuclear bomb went off in East Palestine, Ohio. But it's putting vinyl chloride and all these other pollutants into the water, into the air, into the soil. And it was amazing. The environmental movement almost could not have cared less about a chemical explosion in rural Ohio that is potentially poisoning thousands of people, but they were really, really concerned about the carbon footprint of those same people. I'm sick of the distraction. I think we should focus on the real stuff. And unfortunately, it's true of the environmental policy, but it's true of a lot of other stuff. We just don't talk about the real thing.
The carbon footprint thing is very concerning to me because I'm seeing this concept that being pushed out of having an app that monitors your carbon footprint and limiting the amount of travel you can do and limiting the amount of things.
I know where that's going to go.
Yeah, just control. It's just controlling
absolutely
people.
about control.
And if you can do that, then you can get away with a lot of things. You can get away with a lot of policy.
Yep.
You can get away with a lot of decisions that are made that people wouldn't agree with, because you're going to limit so many things about their life. They're going to become accustomed to being governed
That's right.
in that way. It's disturbing to me that there's also profit that's being made off the green movement. There's a lot of people like Bill Gates who have like making a lot of money off of these environmentally conscious things.
$50 million to Kamala Harris, by the way.
Although it is bullshit fake food, that fake meat, which is not good for anybody.
Creeps me out, man.
Read about fake meat, folks. Read about how they're making this. And I'm not talking about 3D printed meat, which is a very different thing, which seems to be at least more consumable. But for like the plant-based meat stuff, that's garbage. That stuff is garbage. Highly processed garbage. If you want to eat vegetables and be vegetarian, eat Indian food, okay? Like, they make really delicious
I'm
vegetarian
married to an Indian
food.
American. They make very good vegetarian food.
They make the best vegetarian food.
Yeah.
But it tastes good, and it's actually vegetables.
Yeah.
It's not this crazy fake cheeseburger thing that you have. Like,
No, that's right. I mean,
stop eating that.
When I first started dating my wife, I just had no idea like what vegetarians ate. Right, I'm like a meat and potatoes guy from Ohio, and I wanted to make her dinner, and I wanted to really impress her because I was like madly in love with her. And
Did you cook beef?
No, the meal that I made her, I'm not proud of this, but I'll tell you, was, you know what crescent rolls are? Those like Pillsbury yeast rolls.
Yeah.
So I rolled out a flat thing of crescent rolls. I put raw broccoli on top of it. I sprinkled ranch dressing, and I stuck it in the oven for 45 minutes. And
that was it?
Disgusting. And that was my vegetarian pizza that I made.
Wow.
Did
you even follow a recipe?
No.
You just like decided
I'm just like, well,
free
you know,
will?
it's like cream. I know she ate, you know, dairy. It's broccoli and it's bread, right? That's what vegetarians eat. So yeah, I think that, to your point, vegetarian food can actually be quite good.
Yes.
I don't, you know, I still like, I'm kind of one of these people where if I don't have a piece of meat, it's not a complete meal. But if you're going to eat vegetarian, eat paneer and rice and delicious chickpeas. Do not eat this disgusting fake meat.
I'm just very skeptical when someone is promoting things for either global health or for the environment, and then I find out that they have a ton of money invested in companies that could fit those needs.
Yeah.
It's a real problem, this philanthro-capitalism
right.
thing.
It's very weird, man. We got to look at we have to look at the financial incentives of this. I mean, so one of the big things that me and President Trump confront all the time is the accusation that we're somehow like in bed with Russia, which is like the dumbest thing in the world to me. Like, I don't really care about Russia. I just don't think we should have a nuclear war, like writ large. I'm very anti-nuclear war.
That sounds reasonable.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And one of the things they never interrogate is who is the biggest funder of the green energy movement in Europe? It's the Russians. And why are the Russians funding? It's not because they care about climate change. It's because they want the Germans and everybody else to buy Russian natural gas. And they realize that if the Germans and French close down all their coal and nuclear factories, Russia is going to have them by the balls.
How did they get the Germans to close down their nuclear factories?
Oh, it's...
Mine did?
Yeah. Mine did? Oh, okay.
How?
Joe's did?
No idea.
Oh, okay. Let's see what's up. Oh, is this it right here? One of these popped off.
That's weird. It's never happened before.
Is it still
No,
on?
that should be.
Holy shit. The Russians are monitoring this fucking conversation.
I don't know what happened.
Check. Yeah. Oh, I hear me now.
Yeah.
I hear me.
Yeah, okay.
Got it?
Yeah, what happened? No, I'm out. No, it's gone again, Jamie.
Huh.
We'll be right back. Oh,
back.
I'm back. Yeah, but I don't even know if I'm going to stay back. How will I know if it keeps working?
Well, I'm listening, but I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Should we shift? Or should
No.
we just, let's try this and then we can...
Just keep going.
Just let me
Keep
know
going
if it
for
goes
this.
again,
Okay,
and I'll
if it goes
put
again,
my
yeah.
headphones on if it goes again. Had a slight technical problem, ladies and gentlemen. So where were we talking about?
Yeah, that just cut off again.
Oh,
Something
Jamie.
must be with the mute button. It must be. I don't know where it is, but your foot's not touching it.
No.
Am I touching something?
No. It's something.
Okay.
I don't know
It's
why.
back. It's back, Jamie. Jamie, you got to replace this. I keep saying that, but now you really do. We good? I hear it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to move. I'm not touching anything. All right, we're back. What were we just talking about?
Well, we were talking about how you asked why do the Germans shut down the nuclear facilities, and I know. It's they're shutting down coal, they're shutting down any of their base power and leaning really into solar and wind. But again, the green energy movement in Europe is heavily funded by the Russians because the Russians because they produce so much natural gas, they want to have Europe by the balls. So again,
how do they convince them to shut down their nuclear power plants? Though?
Well,
That's
in the
so
same way that
stupid.
Bill Gates is convincing us to eat fake meat, is they fund all this stuff and they make it about the environment. Well, that's true. But he's trying to.
But everybody, the problem is, you look at him and you go, "Hey." How are you a health expert? This is look at you. The funniest thing ever was when Elon showed a photo of Bill Gates next to a photo of a pregnant man emoji, and he said, "If you want to lose a boner real quick," and that's a wild boy. You imagine
Elon is funny as shit, man. He's
funny as shit.
Yeah,
getting
he
dumped
really
on
is.
by that guy's got to suck because you can't even say he's a dumbass.
Right.
You know?
That's right. Yeah. You can say many things. You can't say he's a dumbass.
You get dunked on by one of the smartest guys alive. But the point is, like, Bill doesn't look good. He looks terrible. He's aging way harder than Trump. Like, it doesn't, whatever you're doing, don't eat like that anymore. Like, go to an actual doctor. Like, I don't know what you're doing. Who's telling you to eat your fake meat? You look like shit.
Yeah,
so you can't give
right.
advice. This is crazy. You
That's
can't
exactly
give advice
right.
about health.
Yeah.
You're not a healthy person.
That's right.
You know?
Well, I did. So there's this thing called the Munich Security Conference in Germany. Obviously, it's in Munich. It's kind of like Davos, but for national security. And I went there, and it was like a big deal for me because I went in there as the one skeptic in the entire this like massive Euro complex. Kamala Harris is there. I went as the person skeptical of continued escalation in Ukraine because I think that what we're doing in Ukraine is insane, and that we should have a policy effectively of promoting peace in the region. And we walk in, and one of the people that I'm on this panel with is the leader of the German Green Party. And, she's like 30 years old, and she really, really cares about Russia, Ukraine. She's like the youngest person in the German government. And you realize you are like you guys are literally Russian influence. Like, you're accusing me of wanting to do Russia's bidding. You're encouraging your own country from the perch of government to shut down all baseload power, and you're not even self-aware about how much of your own propaganda is funded by the country that's benefiting from this. The lack of ability to interrogate. I mean, Bill Gates, maybe he's a good guy. I'm highly skeptical. I don't know him very well, but he's getting rich off of all of this stuff that he's supporting in the name of health or in the name of climate. Our inability to just ask ourselves, who's getting rich from this stuff? Maybe we should be skeptical of the people getting rich from this stuff is one of our big failures as a political society.
It's a sheep costume. You put on a sheep costume when you're a wolf.
That's right.
And you make a lot of money with global health.
That's right.
And who doesn't want global health? What a nice guy.
Yeah.
Oh, he's like very philanthropic. He's spending all this money trying to help poor people.
Right.
And then you find out, like, hey, wait a minute, how much money did you make doing that?
Yeah, exactly.
You made up $500 million doing that?
Exactly.
That's crazy. It's a very sneaky move, but he's a smart guy. He's in a lot of very sneaky moves, like the donating all the money to the media companies, which is why they never criticize him.
That's right.
He's donated like $350 million to all these different companies.
That's right. This is, I think, one of the reasons why we don't have more people asking questions about Big Pharma.
Of course.
Is the entire national media. Think about how many pharmaceutical advertisements you watch when you watch a football game. Yeah,
let's get into this because this is an interesting one. So one of the things that happened that separated us from the rest of the world other than New Zealand is in the 1990s, they allowed pharmaceutical drug companies to advertise.
That's right.
Is that something that has to stay that way? Is that something that can be changed with policy, or is the financial incentives of that too big to move?
Oh, you could change it with policy. I don't know that
Do you think that you would have enough support to do something like that?
It's an interesting question. So I've been critical of pharmaceutical advertising for a long time. My assumption is that there are not enough people who would like to do it to actually get it done. But, I've never actually talked to my colleagues about it. So maybe it's possible.
I bet if you ask the American people, I bet that's one of those things. If you put it to a national vote instead of representatives, the problem with representatives is special interest groups.
Yeah,
special interest
exactly
groups
right.
and lobbyists, and the amount of money.
The whole conduit of money into politics is fundamentally broken. I think we have to fix that. But here's the thing, and I say this as a critic of pharmaceutical advertising. Whenever I see a pharma ad, and I pretty much only see them when I'm watching football, I'm always shocked that they actually influence anybody, right? Because it's like, oh, take this drug for rheumatoid arthritis, and you can have all these positive experiences. And it's like, oh, the side effects are, erectile dysfunction, rashes on your face,
suicidal
ideation, tumors in your brain, and you'll hate yourself and be depressed. So you'll need this other drug. And I always wonder, like, you get so many of these weird side effects in the advertisements. How do they actually work? So I actually think that the real corruption is not really that they like persuade Americans. I mean, if you're going to take a drug, you're probably going to take a drug based on conversations with your doctor more than a pharma advertisement, but they do corrupt the media ecosystem. Because if you're getting all that money from the pharma companies, then you're not going to launch investigations into some of the things you should be launching investigations into.
100%. And that's why it's dangerous, because it's not like these are completely innocent companies and have never done anything wrong. So if you all of a sudden have them removed from your list of people that you're investigating just because they advertise, they've essentially bribed you.
That's right.
They've bribed you, and you're supposed to be the people that distribute the actual news to the American people, and you're compromised.
So let me tell you this story, and this is purely secondary. So if somebody tries to fact check it, I heard this from a friend, but I heard it from a friend I trusted. So he was a guy I knew, and he worked at the largest industry lobbying organization for the pharmaceutical companies. And I was in DC, this is a long time ago, and I just kind of ran into him. And I care a lot about the opioid problem. My mom struggled with opioids for a very long time. She's been clean and sober for a while, but I'm very proud of her. I love you, Mom. I know you're watching this, but I ran into this guy in the street in DC, and he had just quit his job for this pharmaceutical lobbying organization, or he was talking about quitting. And I was like, well, why? He's like, man, we just did something that's very dark. And basically what they had figured out is because American Indian tribes, Native Americans, have tribal sovereignty. And so they figured out, I guess, that if they gave some Native American tribe some fraction of a penny of the royalties from the sale of opioids, that they could actually insulate themselves from litigation around the prescription opioid epidemic. And I guess this guy was just like, thought it was so dirty that he was like, I can't work for this organization anymore. And I was like, holy shit, that is some pretty dark stuff. So you guys are giving some Native American tribe like pennies so that you can insulate yourself from pharmaceutical litigation. I'd be very curious. I should follow up on this to see if that actually happened. But again, just to be clear, if the media tries to fact check me, this is what I heard from a friend.
Let's let Jamie fact check it right
Jamie,
now.
I'm very curious if this actually happened. Look into it, because but I think it did happen, because I saw the look on this guy's face, and he was like, "Man, this is some pretty dark stuff."
That's crazy.
Yeah. Man,
but that's how corporations behave. We were just the trigonometry guys were on here yesterday, and we were talking about it. That corporations behave like psychopaths. Like there's a book about it. It's like they describe how this endless pursuit of. It really. You know what it is, Jamie? Whenever I move the mic, tell me when it's back.
You just hit it and it made a noise. It must be the cable that's used to it. Sorry.
Oh, this is it, dude.
Oh, was that?
I got it.
Oh, you got it.
This
okay.
was loose. Try it now. Tell me now.
I mean, I heard that click. I bet that's what it was.
Is that it? We're good?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
What was that thing you want me to check real quick? Sorry.
Pharmaceutical companies using giving royalty streams to Native American tribes to insulate themselves from lawsuits. Anyway, yeah.
It's very scary stuff.
Well, but yeah, this is like one of the things that I think is genuinely different about, and I don't want to get too partisan political here, but about Donald Trump's Republican Party is I mean, obviously, like, there are corporations that we're more pro certain businesses, and we tend to be more anti certain businesses, like, for example, big tech. I hate big tech. We can get into that later. But fundamentally, I think President Trump has changed the mindset of the Republican Party to where it was like instinctively always pro-corporate. We're now sometimes willing to ask, well, is this corporation's interest in the American interest? Like, there was this famous quote, I believe, from the leadership of GM back in the 1950s, that General Motors' interest is America's interest. And I'm probably butchering the quote, but sort of paraphrased. Can anybody really in 2024 say that Google's interest is America's interest, or Apple, which employs thousands of slaves in Shenzhen, is Apple's interest is America's interest? Like, I just don't. That's ridiculous. And the fact that we're at least somewhat skeptical of corporate power in the Republican Party, I think is a very good trend for us.
It is kind of weird that one of the wokest companies, if you thought about like woke companies and like super progressive and like on the right side of everything, Apple's like one of the best ones. And they have phones that are made by slaves. Yeah. Like the people,
like definitionally,
the people they put nets around the building because so many of them were jumping to their deaths.
Yes,
instead of fixing the work conditions, they just go,
"That's
right, put up some nets."
Yeah, put up some nets so that people can't commit suicide.
The crazy thing is, you still, like, all these like progressive people are using these devices to talk about like important social issues.
Oh yeah, well, and talking about distractions, right? The distraction politics versus real politics.
Yes.
If Apple says #BLM and gives a few $1 million to a trans rights organization, then the entire political left ignores that they're profiting off of slave labor.
It's bizarre. Now,
it's crazy.
Why can't Apple? Oh, here it is. It's so gross. It's so
it's
gross.
Crazy, man. It's so sick.
But it's what we were talking about. If you allow these corporations, look, they have an obligation to their shareholders. They have to make more money.
Sure.
What's the best way to make more money? Not get sued. What's the best way to not get sued? Sir, I found a loophole.
Yeah.
You get some fucking Adderall-riddled psychopath who's been working 16 hours like, I got a plan to get us out of here. And it works. It's legal.
I'm sorry. Like, look, I get the imperative to make money, but the guy who thought that up is a grade A sociopath.
Yes.
I mean, that person is. I don't want them anywhere near my kids.
You got to put guardrails up. Like, you have to have laws. That's why you can't have insider trading, right? Like, you have to have guardrails up.
Well,
and if you don't, people go ham.
Yes. And this is why, look, corporations want to go make money. They should make money.
Yes.
Fine. But my job is public and social policy. And what really pisses me off, and frankly what should piss off more Republicans, because again, historically the Republican Party has been the more pro-corporate party, we should be saying to the more that these corporations are engaged in social policy, and in particular left-wing social policy, the more that we should be saying, I don't know that I want to give you everything that you want, which is of course what the historical party did, but I think is much different in the last few years.
I'm just scared that the tentacles of the pharmaceutical industry are so deeply entrenched in politics and in media that you can't just shake them off. You can't just say, hey, you can't advertise on TV anymore, or hey, you no longer have exemption from responsibility from the side effects of certain drugs.
Yep.
Because that whole thing they pulled off with exemption of pharmaceutical companies being responsible for injuries from vaccines
the vax was crazy.
It's crazy because you just empower these people that have lied forever. Yeah, it does still exist.
And it still exists, and that is totally insane. And I mean, I took the vax, and I haven't been boosted or anything, but the moment where I really started to get red pilled on the whole vax thing was the sickest that I've been in the last 15 years by far was when I took the vaccine. And I've had COVID at this point 5 times. I was in bed for 2 days. My heart was racing. I was like, the fact that we're not even allowed to talk about that, even, no like serious injury, but even the fact that we're not even allowed to talk about the fact that I was as sick as I've ever been for 2 days, and the worst COVID experience I had was like a sinus infection. I'm not really willing to trade that. And you don't even, everybody that I know, or a lot of people I know, they talk about the second shot that they got of the vaccine that made them really, really sick. Well, that's a side effect, and not a side effect that we even talk about enough in this country.
No, it's also, again, we're talking about companies that have a long history of lying and being forced to pay criminal fines, and then we're giving them this exemption from being responsible for any of the side effects.
Yeah, and who do you think those big pharma companies donate to politically in 2024? I'll give you a big fat guess.
Probably Kamala Harris.
By a significant margin.
Well, particularly with RFK Jr. being attached to Trump.
Sure.
With RFK Jr. comes a lot of, like there's a lot. There's a lot that you're going to have to handle there. But that's the question is like, are they so entrenched that it's impossible to these things that disturb us, the fact that they have exemption from any responsibility because of the vaccine, the fact that they have the ability to advertise on television, can those things be removed? Is that a possible thing?
I think it's a possible thing, but because I haven't actually done the work to figure out how many of my colleagues would sign on to this, I can't say whether it's like a certain thing or a likely thing or just something that we should be working on. I mean, here's an interesting thought experiment. If there was one thing that we could do to rein in the pharmaceutical companies, like what would it be? Would it be liability on the vax stuff? Would it be advertising? My intuition is actually it might be the advertising on the healthcare stuff because that's the way in which they engulf the media into this whole scam.
That would be great.
But
the vaccine thing is important too because
I will look into it. That's what I'll say here because I would need to talk to people to see if this is even possible.
It's a weird one where you're not even allowed to question it. You're not allowed to discuss it.
Oh, sure.
And that becomes very religious, just like all these other things that we talked about, where you have this thing that everybody speaks about in hushed tones. People know people that have been vaccine injured, and particularly people on the left, they're very reluctant to discuss it, even publicly.
Yeah.
I know people who are public people who have had serious vaccine side effects who do not want anyone to talk about it.
Absolutely.
They're scared of being labeled an anti-vaxxer.
I have a Senate colleague who doesn't want to talk about it, but worries that it's like permanently affected his sort of sense of balance and dizziness and vertigo. And yeah, it happens. I've talked to a number of people who think that they got vaccine injured. Some of them are public about it and some of them are not. But here's the thing, like I'm not even, you're probably more anti-pharma than I am. Like there are certain things.
I'm pretty pro-pharma too. I think they make great drugs that help people with all sorts of conditions
right.
and diabetes medication and insulin.
And I mean, like the sickle cell stuff that's coming out now, we maybe have cured sickle cell disease in Black Americans because of a gene therapy. I read about it a couple weeks ago, actually, that the first experimental therapy, and it was hard for the kid who took it, but you had like an 11 or 12-year-old Black American just walk out of the hospital, and he's probably cured of sickle cell disease, right? That stuff is amazing. But I actually think that in some ways, what we should be encouraging these companies to do is that, right?
Yes.
We want them to develop the life-saving drugs. We don't want them to get rich by shielding themselves from liability or working with Native American tribes so that they don't get sued. And I actually think there maybe even is a harmony between those viewpoints because if they had to get rich by developing life-saving therapeutics, and that's the only way they could get rich, then they'd probably do more of that, right?
100%.
But again, that's where public policy comes in, and that's where like my job is to make sure that when the pharmaceutical companies get rich, they get rich by curing diseases, not by doing like weird